Hello, class. Good morning. I see a few of you online with me today. It's good to be with you. I tell you what, if you can hear me, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let me know that you're here on the chat feature, if you don't mind. If you could do that, that would be great. Good to be with y'all today. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. I'm going to say something in the chat real quick. Kyrie, it's nice to see you. Hi, Marlon and Jocelyn, Caitlin, Jaden. Really good to see you guys. Listen, what I want to do today is I want to talk about the Nietzsche text that is the last thing that we're going to discuss this semester. I'm going to talk about the Nietzsche text for 10 minutes, no more than 10 minutes. And then I've given you another YouTube video to watch for today, for your class today. That link is in Canvas. So I want to just introduce that Nietzsche article. You've already watched the documentary, and we're going to go over section 1 today. And I think that I can do that in 10 minutes or less. And then the video that I'm asking you to watch is over section 2. Then there's another video for Thursday on section 3. And if we have time, we'll see if we can get through section 4 of this essay, The Dionysiac Worldview, but we might not be able to. So I just want to say a few comments to set you up for this essay. But then the other thing that I want to do today is I want to give y'all any opportunities to ask any questions that you want. I think that I've stayed on top of communicating with you guys. I responded to one email about 5 minutes ago. Yeah, so let me do that. Let me say a few things about housekeeping, and then we will discuss this Nietzsche essay, The Dionysiac Worldview, for about 10 minutes, okay? I guess the main thing that I want to say about housekeeping is that really two things. One, it's been a crappy semester. It's been a depressing semester. I don't know what to say other than it has really stunk. And to try to make your lives easier, one thing that I've tried to do is to honestly make it easier for you to do well in this class in terms of your grade. And that is why I decided to give everyone A's for the non-quiz component of your class participation grade. If you do the math, it's around 1/6 of the entire grade for the course, and I gave you all A's on that. The other thing that I wanted to say in terms of housekeeping is just about your final exam. Your final exam will be 10 multiple choice questions. I'm going to give you those questions between now and Thursday. I'm going to give you those questions on Canvas between now and Thursday. I'm not going to give you the answers. And I'm not even going to talk through the answers with you, but I'm going to give you the questions so that you guys are able to find those answers before the final exam. I know that that's crazy, but that's the way I'm going to do it in this weird pandemic semester. In terms of the actual scheduled time for the exam, I don't know when our class is scheduled to take the exam at this. I don't know what that is right now. If someone knows that, I would love it if you could send me that in an email, but I will find out. But let me say this, the total window during which the final exam will be open on Canvas, that total window will include the scheduled 3-hour block, 2 or 3 hour block, but it will be bigger than that. So if I will probably allow you like a complete 24-hour period, maybe even a 48-hour period in which to take the exam, and I will communicate that on Canvas, okay? Y'all, let me hit the pause button real quick and just say, does anyone have any questions about anything that I've said? Does anyone have any questions at all about the class? those are my two housekeeping things that I wanted to talk about. Number one, just some overall thoughts about the semester and your grade. Secondly, about the final exam. Does anyone have any questions for me at the moment? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to write down questions in the chat. Okay, I don't think that I'm getting any questions, which is a good thing. Let me go ahead, and for about 10 minutes now, I just want to introduce this essay that we're reading from this volume, The Birth of Tragedy and Other Writings by Friedrich Nietzsche. The title of the essay is The Dionysiac Worldview, The Dionysiac Worldview, and that is uploaded for you on Canvas. And what I want to do is just say some things that will help you with the lecture that I've asked you to watch for today and also one on Thursday. And really, this is the contents of section 1. There's 4 sections of this essay, and what I'm about to say is essentially enough to get you through section 1 so that you could start reading with section 2, I believe. And I really have 3 bullet points today. 1 is I want to talk to you about Schopenhauer. 2, I want to talk to you about Apollo. And 3, I want to talk to you about Dionysus, okay? So first off is Schopenhauer. If you watched the Nietzsche documentary, you remember that one of Nietzsche's greatest influences, one of the thinkers that influenced him perhaps more than any other, is a man named Arthur Schopenhauer. Arthur Schopenhauer was a philosopher, and he was a very dark man, and he had a very pessimistic, nihilistic worldview. But let me back up a little bit and start out like this. Do you remember when we talked about Heraclitus? In some ways, I structure my entire class around this dialectic between Heraclitus and Parmenides. And if you think back to Heraclitus, both in our lectures on Heraclitus, but also the essay that I put up on Canvas, I think by Peter Adamson. If you think back to when we were talking about Heraclitus, you might remember phrases like blooming, buzzing confusion. We talked about how for Heraclitus, that which is real is a blooming, buzzing confusion. You can think about the phrase prime matter. You can think about the formlessness and void of Genesis 1-2. Heraclitus doesn't think that there are real things in the world that you can describe. He doesn't think that there are real pens in the world that you can describe. Rather, he thinks that everything is just in constant flux. It's as if there's no such thing as form in the world. It's as if in reality, everything around us, including ourselves, is just a swirling vortex. It's like a whirlpool of matter or bits. You can't even really say atoms. It's like a whirlpool of particles that's just swirling around, okay? I know that sounds weird, but that should sound familiar if you think back to when we talked about Heraclitus. Now, one of the metaphors that Peter Adamson uses in that essay to describe Heraclitus is the metaphor of salad dressing. I'm going to write that in the chat. The metaphor of vinaigrette. Vinaigrette. Oops, I don't know how to spell salad dressing. How do you spell vinaigrette? Oh, wow. Peter Adamson talks about the metaphor of vinaigrette salad dressing. If you imagine that I'm holding in my hand a bottle of vinaigrette salad dressing, and you might remember, or you might know that in vinaigrette salad dressing, there's oil and there's water. But what happens is that the oil, which is heavier and thicker, settles at the bottom of the vinaigrette salad dressing jar, and the water sort of stays on top. So what you have to do with that vinaigrette salad dressing, what do you have to do? Let me ask you, class, what do you have to do to that vinaigrette salad dressing if you want it to be good? You have to shake it up, right? You have to take that bottle and shake it up. That way the oil at the bottom and the water at the top swirl around and they mix together and they become one thing, one substance. Peter Adamson talks about this in that essay. This is one of the ways in which you can say that for Heraclitus, reality is one. Now, it's not one in the same way that it's one for Parmenides, but still, if you think about that swirling mix of oil and water, you could say that that's one thing, right? And that's kind of like Arthur Schopenhauer. Arthur Schopenhauer's big phrase is das Ureine in German, which means the primordial one. Das Ureine, or the primordial one. That's Schopenhauer, okay? But that's kind of like Heraclitus's bottle of salad dressing after you've shaken it up. After you've shaken it up and the oil and the water are flowing around each other, flowing in and out of each other, that salad dressing becomes one thing. It's one mass or swirling body of salad dressing. It's no longer two things, oil and water. It's one thing that's just mixed together. And that's kind of like Heraclitus's picture of the world. And it's also kind of like Schopenhauer's picture of the world when he speaks of das Ureine, or the primordial one, okay? Now, that is what Schopenhauer thinks reality is. In other words, Schopenhauer is what we would call a nihilist. We've talked about nihilism over and over during the semester. Schopenhauer would say, if you think you see a pen here, it's actually an illusion. The pen is actually not real. What's real is the primordial one, this swirling vortex, okay? Now, y'all, Schopenhauer gives a name to this primordial one. He gives a name to this swirling vortex, and the name that he gives it is will. W-I-L-L. Notice he doesn't call it reason, he calls it will. And you might remember from the documentary that Nietzsche is obsessed with this idea of the will to power, and that's very much connected to Schopenhauer's notion of will. What Schopenhauer thinks is ultimately real is will. It's the swirling vortex of particles and mass and energy, but he calls it will, okay? Now, I want to move to a discussion of Apollo and Dionysus now, because let me ask you a question. How do you feel about this notion that which is most real in the world, the thing that's real in the world, the true nature of the world is will, this swirling vortex of impersonal forces? How does that make you feel? If you're honest, I would imagine that you don't like it. I would imagine, if you're a normal person, whatever that means, that you find it kind of scary and kind of traumatic. Well, that would be a reasonable way to feel about Schopenhauer's worldview. And so the Greeks come along and they say, oh my God, this is so scary. We have to shield ourselves from this. Okay, so that's what Apollo is for Nietzsche. In this essay, The Dionysiac Worldview, when Nietzsche talks about the Apollonian worldview, or the Apollonian, or the Greek god Apollo, he is talking about images. He's talking about art. Apollo is the deity of light and the deity of images and the deity of pictures. Think about pictures. Like, I don't have any pictures that I can show you right now. Actually, yes, I do. Think about art and pictures. Look, I have an icon of Christ and the Virgin Mary and the baby Jesus, the Christ child. These are images, right? Well, Dionysus in Nietzsche's mind is the god of images, art, pictures, poetry, because you might remember, as we've discussed in this class, that in the ancient imagination and in the ancient mind, poetry is about images. When Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, he had images in his mind, and he's trying to provoke those images in the imagination of his readers slash hearers. And so Apollo is the deity of images and of poetry. And for Nietzsche, the purpose of these images, the purpose of poetry, the purpose of dreams, because for Nietzsche, dreams are very much connected to poetry and images. The purpose of all of that is to shield us and to distract us and allow us to cope with the traumatic nature of reality, which is das Ureine, which is the primordial one, which is this swirling vortex of matter and force that is all around us. The purpose of Apollonian art for Nietzsche is to shield us and help us to cope with the traumatic nature of reality, aka the fact that reality is really will, a will to power, a will that is not my will, but rather I'm subject to this will. Okay, that's the purpose of the Apollonian or Apollo. When it comes to Dionysus, Dionysus is not the god of images and poetry and pictures and icons. No, Dionysus is the deity of intoxication. Okay, so if the purpose of Apollo is to shield us and to distract us and to allow us to cope with the traumatic nature of reality, guess what? The purpose of the Dionysian or the Dionysiac is to help us to celebrate the nature of reality, to become intoxicated with the nature of reality, to rise above our fears and to embrace this horrific vortex of forces, which Schopenhauer calls das Ureine. Okay, y'all, that is basically section 1 of this essay in a nutshell. That's kind of like an introduction to this essay, the Dionysiac worldview. You've got Schopenhauer, who introduces this notion of the will, and that's the basic nature of all reality. Then you have Apollo, the Apollonian, which is what the Greeks used, according to Nietzsche, to shield themselves and to help themselves cope with the traumatic nature of reality. And then there's the Dionysian, which allows us to celebrate and embrace the traumatic and horrific nature of reality by embracing it. Okay? Now, the one last thing that I want to say is that for Nietzsche, these two forces, and here again, how many times in this class have we talked about the notion of dialectic? What Nietzsche very much sees these two forces, the Apollonian and the Dionysiac, he sees them as being in a relationship of dialectic. And he says that the main historical situation in which the two came together perfectly was in Attic tragedy in ancient Greece, especially the tragic plays of Aeschylus and I think Sophocles. In those tragic plays, Nietzsche says, the Greek civilization and Greek culture was able perfectly to seamlessly weave together the Dionysiac and the Apollonian worldviews into one production of art. And he talks a lot about that. One last thing, and that's simply to say, which of these two forces, let me ask you, class, this is the one question I'll ask you, and then we'll close the lecture. Which of these two forces, the Apollonian or the Dionysian, which of those two do you think that Nietzsche prefers? Which does he think is more awesome, the Apollonian or the Dionysian? Let me hear your response to that question on chat. I'm pretty much finished with my lecture. Let me see if you guys, very good. Brandon, you are correct. The Dionysian. Let me spell that for you. I would actually say Dionysian. Dionysian Dionysian, either one works. That's right. Nietzsche's all about music and will. Part of what Nietzsche has in the back of his mind is the notion of music. So if the Apollonian is about images that you can see visually, the Dionysian is about music which can draw you into a frenzy. Have you ever been to a rock concert in which you felt like the entire the thousands of people in that crowd were sort of all coming together in this spiritual experience? That's what Nietzsche has in mind. Like if you think about Woodstock, how it was a spiritual experience. A lot of people were smoking pot. Again, Dionysius is the god of intoxication. So sometimes in concerts, there's this spiritual experience that can catch you up and draw you into this mass of spiritual exuberance and intoxication. That's what Nietzsche has in mind when he talks about the Dionysian. So for him, it's not connected to images, it's connected to music, and he very much prefers the Dionysian over the Apollonian. Okay, y'all, that's it for me. I want you to go ahead and watch that other YouTube video that I put the link to on Canvas. And I hope you're well. If anyone has any questions, comments, feel free to text me or send me an email. We're going to have this same drill on Thursday that we did today. I'm going to have a very brief lecture, partly just to check in with you. And then I'm going to have you watch one last video. Our last class is this coming Thursday, okay? Hope you guys are well, and may the force be with you. And also with you. Take care. Bye-bye.